You just finished up a panel on the middle class.
Right.
I guess my question is, what is the blogosphere role in trying to put on the table the solutions to lift up the middle class again? It's very easy for blogs to say this economy is bad, Bush policies are bad, but the other side of that coin, what do we do about it? What role do blogs have to play in taking some of these complicated subjects, housing crisis, credit crisis, Freddie Mac bailouts, distilling that and getting that message out to the broader public?
Well, I think the blogosphere really has two separate functions, or at least the way I approach it does. On the one hand, there is that activism, let's help elect the right candidates function. A lot of money raising. What Marco says, talks about he doesn't want to turn the Netroots into an ATM. Actually, turning the Netroots into an ATM is one of the most powerful things we can do, because then we can elect good candidates who will enact the policies we want, like, and I'll plug her, Darcy Berner, in Washington's 8th Congressional District. The other side, of course, is that media function which we do, which whether you want to consider us journalists or not, I think that, especially on the local side, where the size of our audience is necessarily limited, our biggest role is actually in helping to frame the public debate, and mostly being a watchdog on the watchdogs. We are media critics, and so because the established media, the traditional media, the legacy media, the mainstream media, whatever you want to call it, they're the ones who really have the larger audience. Our most important role is to fact-check them and ridicule them and force them into correcting themselves when they're wrong and covering the issues that they refuse to cover.
How is the economy being framed? Is the blogosphere framing the issues facing the middle class well at this point, or is there some sharpening and honing that needs to be done?
No, I don't think we are particularly doing it well, and I think partially it's because, as I said in the session we just had, I feel like I've fallen into despair sometimes. It's a very difficult issue to frame because we're coming up against 3-4 decades of a concerted right-wing effort to frame these economic issues in ways that are advantageous to them and incredibly disadvantageous to us. And one of the examples I use is tax issues. In Washington State, we have the most regressive tax structure in the nation. Regressive. It's a very progressive state. It's a very blue state, but we don't have an income tax. We have one of the highest sales taxes in the nation, and at the local level, we're about to raise it to 10% in Seattle. 10% sales tax. We have the highest gas tax in the nation. We have the highest tobacco tax in the nation. Excise taxes like these are the most regressive tax. And when you talk about this issue with people and you tell them that, if you earn $18,000 a year, you're paying about 17.6% of your income in taxes, and if you're earning $200,000 a year, you're paying about 3.5% of your income in state and local taxes. And you talk about how unsustainable that is, and it is unsustainable, and you talk about what an unfair burden that is on working class and middle class families. You've now used their language. You're now talking about burden, which says taxes are bad. Inherently, taxes are bad. We talked about earlier the use of the word tax relief. When you use that term, when we don't provide property tax relief, you've now fallen into their frame. So we found ourselves in a situation in Washington State where we have this very regressive system, and there's no positive way to talk about the changes.
And is the solution to that trying to talk about making the connection between a fair tax structure and what the public gets out of that? What investments you can make that would actually benefit the middle class life?
Well, I think we're talking about a very long-term process. We're talking about it took them 3-4 decades. Maybe it'll take us a decade or two. Because we have a lesson. Their lesson we can learn from and reproduce some of the things they've done in terms of building progressive infrastructure. We can use technology, we can use their example, we can be as shameless as they are, and maybe in a decade or two we can co-opt their frame the way they've co-opted ours, because the right, at least on the West Coast where we have that initiative process, The right, they have used these populist tools to get their agenda through. And it puts us right now in Washington State. If we don't get an income tax, if we don't do tax restructuring, the right wins. Because we are taxing, since we rely on a sales tax, we are taxing a part of the economy that's shrinking year by year by year. That's the sale of goods. That might have been the largest part of the economy 70 years ago. It's becoming one of the smallest. So government shrinks if we do nothing. They win. They win. So we need to be much more focused. What we need to do is actually invest in the type of infrastructure that can get our message out. But when we start talking about investment in government, yeah, that's intellectually, that's very appealing. But emotionally, to somebody who's paying 17, 18% of their income in state and local taxes and are just making ends meet, when you start talking about investing, to them it sounds like you're going to take their money and invest it. And they need their money to buy a tank of gas. Most people agree with us on the issues. And we still lose. So we can go into these factual debates and we can try to be as informative as possible. And it goes over people's heads. And I'm not saying that to be arrogant. I don't mean to demean anybody. But most people really don't care to dig down into the details of policy. They just want policies that solve their problems. When we talk about healthcare reform, you know, Barack Obama's proposal or Hillary Clinton's proposal, people really don't care which one it is. They want the one that works. So do something that works, and that'll make people happy. Deliver. And it's all about, in the end, delivering, because one of the curious things, since where Democrats have succeeded in recent years, the Republicans are losing the suburbs the way the Democrats lost the South. And one of the reasons why is, at least instinctually, voters seem to understand. You move to a suburb for a better quality of life for yourself and your children. And that better quality of life is defined by better schools and safer streets, parks, libraries, public utilities, all things that government provides. And not only that, you move there and then you vote to raise your property tax to pay for these things. So suburban voters are voting Democratic because they believe in government the way we do. They want government. The trick is to get people to be conscious of that. Yeah, I'll sound like a Marxist. We need some class consciousness, which we don't have, unfortunately. And that's the process. I mean, people need to learn to, the working class and the middle class need to learn to identify with each other instead of identifying with the wealthy, which I think is the genius of modern conservatism.